Marcus was standing in line outside an Apple store on a Friday morning in September, waiting to spend $1,199 on a brand new phone. The strange part was this: the phone already in his pocket worked perfectly. It was only 18 months old. It still made calls, sent texts, ran every app he needed, and took photos more than good enough for Instagram. Nothing about it had actually changed. But the night before, Marcus watched the keynote presentation from Tim Cook. And suddenly something felt different. Not excitement. Something closer to dissatisfaction. His phone hadn't become worse overnight. But somehow, it felt like it had. And that moment is exactly where the illusion begins. I call this phenomenon the upgrade illusion. It's the moment when a perfectly good device suddenly starts to feel outdated, not because it stopped working, not because it can't do what you need, but simply because something newer now exists. Your phone didn't break. Your laptop didn't suddenly lose its abilities. What changed was your perception. And that shift is incredibly valuable to companies like Apple, Samsung, and Google. Because the modern tech industry isn't built on selling you a great device once. It's built on selling you the same device over and over again, packaged as a breakthrough each time. A slightly faster processor. A slightly brighter screen. One more camera lens. Tiny improvements, presented as revolutionary upgrades. And the companies behind them don't actually need to make your old device worse. They just need to make you feel like it is. And once you start noticing that trick, you begin to see it everywhere. To understand why the upgrade illusion matters, you have to look at the scale. In the United States, the average smartphone is replaced roughly every 33 months, according to research from Counterpoint Research. At the same time, the average selling price of a smartphone has climbed to over $850, based on estimates from consumer intelligence research partners. Over a typical 40-year adult life, that alone adds up to more than $12,000 spent on smartphones. But phones are only the beginning. Now add the rest of the modern tech ecosystem. Laptops replaced every few years, tablets that feel outdated after the next update, smartwatches that promise better health tracking, wireless earbuds, and an endless stream of smart home gadgets. When researchers looked at the total picture, they found that the average American household spends about $1,700 per year on consumer electronics. Over 40 years, that becomes roughly $68,000. And if that same $1,700 per year were invested instead, earning a modest 8% annual return, it would grow to around $340,000. That's the real scale of the upgrade illusion. Because you're not just buying technology. You're buying scheduled dissatisfaction. So how exactly does the upgrade illusion work? It isn't random. It isn't accidental. It's driven by a set of mechanisms that the tech industry has refined over the last 2 decades. And once you understand them, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Mechanism 1. Software obsolescence. The first mechanism happens through software. Over time, older devices start to feel slower. Apps take longer to open. Animations feel less smooth. Battery life seems to decline faster than you remember. Sometimes this slowdown happens naturally as hardware ages. But sometimes it's also the result of software updates designed for newer devices. In 2017, Apple publicly acknowledged that it had been throttling the performance of certain older iPhones. The official explanation was that the slowdown protected aging batteries from unexpected shutdowns. Technically, that explanation made sense. But the psychological effect was much bigger. Phones that had worked perfectly fine suddenly felt slower, weaker, and more frustrating to use. And for many users, the timing of that slowdown felt suspiciously close to the release of newer models. Even without intentional throttling, the pattern still happens. Every new operating system demands more from a device. More RAM, more processing power, more storage, more background services running at once. Your 3-year-old phone can still technically run the newest version of the software. But it runs it less comfortably. More lag. More battery drain. More small annoyances. You didn't break your phone. But the software environment around it slowly evolves until the hardware begins to feel outdated. Mechanism 2. Hardware obsolescence. The second mechanism happens through physical design. Modern electronics are often engineered in ways that make repairs difficult or expensive. Batteries are sealed inside the device. Screens are glued into place. Specialized screws require proprietary tools. These design choices make devices thinner and more water-resistant. But they also make simple maintenance harder for the average user. Take something as basic as a battery replacement. For many smartphones, replacing the battery through the official manufacturer can cost somewhere between $89 and $119. For a device that's already 2 or 3 years old, many people hesitate. They start thinking, maybe it's not worth fixing. Maybe I should just upgrade. And that's exactly the decision manufacturers benefit from. A relatively small repair cost suddenly becomes the psychological trigger for buying a completely new device. Mechanism 3, the annual launch cycle. The third mechanism is perhaps the most powerful. Every year, like clockwork, the tech industry creates a massive cultural moment around new product launches. For companies like Apple, that moment often arrives in September. There's a keynote presentation, a wave of advertising, hundreds of YouTube reviews, endless social media comparisons. For a few weeks, the entire internet seems to focus on one thing, the newest device. And during that moment, something subtle happens. Your current phone, the same one that worked perfectly yesterday, suddenly starts to feel like last year's technology. Not because it stopped working. Not because it lost any features. But because the spotlight has shifted to something newer. And once that comparison enters your mind, the upgrade illusion does the rest. Now, to be fair, technology does improve. Each new generation of devices is technically better than the last. Marketing departments proudly describe these releases as revolutionary upgrades. But when you look closely, the improvements are usually incremental. A processor that's 3 to 5% faster. A camera that performs slightly better in low-light conditions. A display that's marginally brighter outdoors. These are real improvements. But the more important question is, do they meaningfully change your daily experience? For most people, the answer is no. Because the vast majority of what people actually do on their phones hasn't changed in years. They send texts. They scroll social media. They take photos. They check email. They use maps. They stream videos. And a flagship phone from 3 years ago can already do all of those things extremely well. In fact, research from Wayne State University found something interesting when users tested different generations of flagship phones. When people performed everyday tasks, browsing apps, sending messages, opening photos, most participants could not reliably tell the difference between newer and older flagship devices. In synthetic benchmarks designed to measure performance, the differences were clear. But in normal daily use, the experience felt almost identical. Which leads to an uncomfortable realization. When someone spends $1,000 on the newest phone, they usually aren't paying for a dramatically different experience. They're paying for something else. They're paying for the reassurance of knowing they have the newest version. And that satisfaction has far more to do with psychology than with technology. One of the most powerful tricks behind the upgrade illusion is how the comparison is framed. When most people think about upgrading their phone, they imagine a simple choice. On one side, their current device, which now feels a little older. On the other side, a brand new flagship phone with the latest features. In other words, the comparison most people make looks like this. Old phone versus the newest device on the market. But that comparison is misleading. Because the real alternative to buying a new phone isn't necessarily buying another one. Sometimes the best option is simply keeping the device you already have, especially if it still performs well for the things you actually use it for. And when you do eventually upgrade, there's another option most people overlook: refurbished devices. Companies like Apple, Samsung, and marketplaces such as Back Market sell professionally refurbished phones that were flagship models just a few years ago. A flagship phone from 2 generations earlier often costs about 50% less than the newest model. Yet in everyday use, the performance difference is often closer to 95% identical. The upgrade illusion works because it convinces people that anything older must be obsolete. But in reality, most of those devices are still extremely capable. They just stop being the newest thing on stage. To see the real impact of the upgrade illusion, imagine 2 people with identical tech needs. Person A upgrades constantly. Every couple of years they buy the newest phone. They replace laptops frequently. They upgrade accessories whenever a new version appears. On average, they spend about $2,800 per year on personal technology. Now consider person B. They keep their phone for 4 or 5 years. When the battery weakens, they replace it. When they do upgrade, they often buy refurbished flagship devices. Their annual spending is closer to $900 per year. That difference, about $1,900 every year, may not sound dramatic at first. But over a 30-year working life, it adds up to roughly $57,000 in direct spending. And the real cost isn't just the money spent. It's the opportunity cost. If that same $1,900 per year were invested in a simple index fund earning about 8% annually, it would grow to approximately $214,000. So the real cost of the upgrade cycle isn't the phone in your hand. It's the wealth you never get the chance to build. Escaping the upgrade illusion doesn't require extreme minimalism. It just requires a few simple rules. First, define your real use case. Ask yourself one honest question. What do I actually do with this device every day? If your phone still handles messaging, photos, navigation, and the apps you rely on, then you probably don't need more processing power. Second, maintain the devices you already own. Replace aging batteries. Clean up storage. Delete unused apps. Occasionally perform a factory reset. A $100 repair can often extend the life of a device by several years. Third, consider buying refurbished. Many refurbished flagship phones deliver 90 to 95% of the performance of the newest model, often at half the price. And finally, set your own upgrade timeline. A good smartphone should last 4 to 5 years. A good laptop can last 6 to 7 years. Not 2. Here's the truth most product launches won't tell you. Your phone didn't suddenly become worse when a new model was announced. What changed was your perception. Because every year, billions of dollars are spent convincing you that what you have is no longer enough. But you're not behind. You're being told that you're behind by companies that profit when you believe it. So the next time a new device launches, remember something simple. Keep what works. Ignore the illusion. And invest the difference. If this changed the way you think about your next upgrade, consider subscribing for more videos like this.